Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, and this is the Cornish motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 803, an act relating to public safety. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. The Conference Committee report is addressed to the Honorable Michelle L. Fischbach, President of the Senate, and the Honorable Kurt L. Doudt, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 803, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The Conference Committee report is signed by 4 of the 5 conferees on behalf of the Senate and 4 of the 5 conferees on the part of the House. Cornish moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 803 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish, who will explain the report.
Mr. Speaker and members, this is my motion to Senate File 803 Conference Committee report adoption. Mr. Speaker and members, Mr. Speaker, if I could first of all ask for a roll call vote. I'll wait.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, I've got a short summary here of the bill and then ready to get into it as deep as you would like. The change item highlights the Conference Committee report doesn't include the 1% year compensation increases across the judiciary and agencies that the original House bill funded. Also not included is Representative Grossel's bill that enhanced supervision and penalties for certain criminal sexual conduct and child pornography crimes, which was funded at $5.8 million in the House bill. The conference report includes $13 million for the biennium for police training, a reduction of $1 million from the House portion. This amount sunsets after the fiscal year 2021 biennium in the conference report. Several items from the Senate and/or requests from the governor weren't included that were included that were not in the original House bill. They include a little over $1 million for mandated services deficit at district courts, $750,000 for Roseau County disaster reimbursement, $2.3 million for critical technology modernization at the Department of Corrections, $922,000 to the Community Justice Account, which was created in last year's bill on drug sentencing reform, $8.865 million to reduce court filing fees. Several provisions from the original House bill did not make it out of the Conference Committee. The list is a little lengthy here. Representative Johnson's bill requiring legislative approval for modifications to sentencing guidelines, my bill for increasing penalties and requiring registration for certain predatory offenses, Representative Heinzman's bill on enhanced penalties for multiple driving without license offenses, Representative Zerwas' bill that dealt with segregation guidelines in state correctional institution, Representative Lunen's provision with the gas pump skimming crimes, Representative Clark's bill regarding geographic boundary restrictions by court order, Representative Frankie's provision establishing a new state terrorism crime, Representative Grossel's enhanced penalties for assaulting medical personnel in hospitals, Representative Becker-Finn's proposal to develop domestic violence prevention program in the DOC, Representative Grossel's criminal sexual conduct bill stays prohibited and enhanced supervision penalties for certain crimes, Representative Lesch's electronic monitoring bill project, pilot project extension for domestic abusers, Representative Erdahl's bill that makes utility co-op eligible for state disaster assistance money, and then my bill from the DWI task force bill that reflects the U.S. and Minnesota Supreme Court decisions related to implied consent and blood and urine warrants. That's it for the summary, and I'll stand for questions.
Discussion to the adoption of the Conference Committee. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The first day of the Public Safety Conference Committee, we met, and the Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, in an unprecedented fashion, testified before the Conference Committee, and I quote, "The judiciary is not a mere state agency. The judiciary is a branch of government, and it deserves to be funded as such. A vibrant judiciary is essential to a well-functioning democracy. The courts are vital to government's basic function of protecting public safety, ensuring individuals' rights, and providing a forum for the orderly and civil resolution of disputes. When everything else breaks down, the courts are where the people come, and they come seeking justice. After the conference committee's agreement was released, Justice Gilday issued the following statement in response. The legislature's failure to prioritize public safety and the justice system in this critical budget setting process is deeply troubling. The conference committee proposal, if passed into law, would have significant consequences for Minnesota's justice system. This proposed budget would leave our district courts without enough judges to manage a rising caseload in an effective and timely manner. It would jeopardize our state's drug courts, DWI courts, and veterans courts, which are effective tools for combating the rise of substance abuse in our state. It would put the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk by harming our ability to find qualified court interpreters or pay for psychological examinations of court participants. It would put the private and sensitive data of Minnesotans at risk by not allowing our courts to implement needed cybersecurity improvements. House and Senate leaders have called their budget advancing the Minnesota way. Jeopardizing public safety and access to justice is not the Minnesota way. Funding our justice system has long been a bipartisan priority in Minnesota, and especially given the state's current fiscal stability, it must remain a priority. Then she goes on and says, on behalf of Minnesota's judicial branch and the people of Minnesota, I urge the legislature to work with the governor on a budget plan that preserves a high-functioning justice system in Minnesota. So what is in the bill or not in the bill that would cause this unprecedented statement? Without enough judges to manage caseloads in an effective and timely manner. Well, this bill adds 2 judges, but the seatbelt gag rule repeal costs more than 1 judge unit. The governor's budget proposal fully funded the MJB request for 2 new justices. That is not in the bill. The conference committee agreement provides funding for those 2 judgeships, but again, once you pay for the amount of cost for repealing the seatbelt gag rule, the 2 judges are not placed where the majority of cases, based on that new law, would be. You actually end up doing more harm than good. It jeopardizes state drug courts, DWI courts, veterans courts, which are an effective tool for combating substance abuse in our state. So why would that be the case? It does not fund the court's request to fully fund an ongoing system. The governor proposed the budget that fully funded the Minnesota judicial branch's request of $1.7 million a year. That's not in the bill, merely $100,000 is. It puts the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk by harming the ability to find qualified court reporters and pay for these exams. And what else? It cuts between 40 and 50 public defenders. When this bill left this body, it had a 1% increase for salaries. The House and Senate compromise position went halfway between the Senate's very low-funded bill and the House's, thereby actually eliminating that funding, resulting in this being a cut bill. It cuts public defenders. The guardian ad litem program would be negatively impacted. Court reporters, court interpreters. And then there's just the judge compensation as well. They had requested 3.5% increase per year. There is none at all. So then let's go to the Department of Public Safety. This body continues to talk about public safety as a priority, but there is nothing safe about this bill. This bill would result in 180 staff positions being cut or going unfilled based on the cost of the salary increases that's already in the bill. They'd either have to do that by layoffs or by unfilled positions remaining vacant. This bill does not fund the predatory offender registration system. There's been much talk this session about how important it is to not have secret sex offenders and for the public to know where it is that sex offenders are and so that they can be tracked. That's not funded in this bill at all. Then there's a lack of funding in the AGED program, which jeopardizes our ability to re-inspect the very breweries and distilleries that we just talked about in Representative Hoppy's bill. That's not funded in this bill. Then we talk about the operational funding that was not included. So that's drug chemistry, firearms examinations, the BCA investigators. So members, what happens is by not funding those requirements, Minnesota will have to choose what it is that we will be most effective at. The state government finance bill isn't even talked about besides in this bill, but that has additional cuts in that bill in this area as well. The Department of Corrections officers will see between 200 and 250 officers laid off based on this bill alone. And when you add that to Representative Anderson's bill, that would be another 199 corrections officers. So that's between 400 and 450 layoffs in the Department of Corrections. We lost the amendment that would have funded some of our CAT teams and safeties out of the railroad funds. So this bill ends up being a windfall for railroads. There's no money for disaster relief account and the firefighter issues. We take it out of the firefighters account. So members, again, at this point, there is nothing safe about this public safety bill. And I would encourage you to vote no.
The member from Washington, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there is a chart coming around now that will point out something that I think will be very helpful. Youth intervention programs have been around for 30, 40 years, but most counties have had to cut them because their funding isn't adequate. The state has not continued to support funding for youth intervention programs. In this committee, we've talked a lot about prison population. We've talked about prison reform. We've talked a lot about punishment and rehabilitation. We talk about reforming people. Most of us are old enough to remember reform schools. And that was about turning kids around. What youth intervention programs do is intervene at an early point before kids get into big trouble. And even if they get into big trouble, the youth intervention programs are there to help them. I want to read something to you. My name is Amanda. I'm in the 11th grade, and I live on the west side. I believe youth intervention programming is very important to our community because it helps kids break the cycle of poverty and other recurring societal issues. The West Side is strong, and I think a big part of that is the essential youth programming that's available. The biggest impact youth programming has had on me is that it's connected me more to the community and helped me find mentors that I otherwise would not have. So if you'll look at that chart, I think most of you have them now, you'll see that costs for incarceration have gone up and up and up, and the state has been funding these. On the other hand, funding for the youth intervention programs has been relatively flat. It costs a lot more to take care of people in prison and to help adults overcome the addictions and the criminal thinking, all of the behaviors that they have long established. Youth intervention programs, on the other hand, are much less expensive and far more effective at turning people into productive adults. Youth intervention works with youth that are living in trauma and helps them become productive adults. Youth intervention programs should be considered an essential service that the state provides, since we pay higher costs to let them become adult consumers of public services. Public safety is jeopardized when we ignore youth we know are at risk of entering the justice system. Only 5% of the estimated 300,000 youth at risk are touched by the youth intervention grants. We need to spend billions on youth instead of billions on adults needing intervention. Thank you.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I voted for this when it left the floor. I will be a no vote today. First of all, I think we have to support the judiciary, and I don't believe that the Chief Justice is being dramatic or hysterical. I think there's a real problem there with what hasn't happened. But I'm also kind of surprised to find the driver's license stuff in here. That is not a bill that we even heard in public safety. And so how it got back in here, I'm a bit troubled by. Chair Cornish has been at events with me when I have talked about the Public Safety Committee and how it is traditionally been nonpartisan and one of the great committees to work on. But having this snuck in, I just can't vote for that or go along with that kind of a procedure. So I'm a no vote. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dean R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The bill that came back was as bad as the bill that left. There are many provisions in here that, although the argument is made about them being for public safety, there clearly seems to be a mean-spirited part of this bill. The protests provisions around nuisance, which changes the penalties from misdemeanors to gross misdemeanors. If your intent is not to sort of increase our prison population, something that we've worked drastically on the past several years, then clearly your intent is that you want to quelch speech and you want those people that go out into the freeways, that disrupt everyday people's lives, people whose lives have been disrupted by the structure of the system that we've put in place over these decades, then I think you succeed in that. Because clearly, this is not about trying to make people's lives better or not about trying to make people's lives safer. The provision around the private prison requiring the Commissioner or Department of Corrections to do a study on the value. Again, you're trying to increase prison beds. You're trying to make it virtually impossible for there not to be a situation that we asked the Department of Corrections to deal with, and then we add this provision on it. And then I want to speak lastly about Real ID, because this actually freezes the existing rules in a statute, a provision that currently is making it not possible for us to pass Real ID. Real ID would pass out of here tomorrow if it was just left to be the way it is, that there are existing rules that the governor has said he would not change, that would allow us to implement Real ID. It would pass out of here tomorrow. I bet it even passed today if there was a suspension of rules put forward. But you're choosing to put this in place because you think it somehow makes people in the state of Minnesota safer. I don't know how having people not take driver's license tests, having people not get driver's insurance makes anybody safer. And if anything, I think that this might even be tied back into private prisons. Lo and behold, the #1 occupier of prison beds across the United States is ICE, Department of Immigration and Customs. They're the individuals that are putting undocumented people that quite frankly whose only crime might be to come back into this country after they were deported once. These are people that are contributing taxes. These are people that are contributing Social Security. These are people that are working hard every day to make better lives for their families. No different than what all of us do in Minnesota. So I think this bill is actually somewhat perverted because I think it twists things to make it seem like we're trying to make things safer for the people of Minnesota. And that's a great face you're making at me, Majority Leader. That's so wonderful to see that. I just want to reiterate, there's really nothing safe about this public safety bill, and I would hope that we would not accept it.
The member from Dakota, Representative May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, I joined, excuse me, some of my colleagues who were a yes when this bill left the floor, and today just a no. And there's a lot of reasons, and there's two I want to talk about. The first one is the protest piece that Representative Dean talked about. Protest is the act of telling the truth in public. And sometimes we use our bodies to tell the truth. That was true when union workers did it, when women did it for the right to vote, in the 60s, when people of color did it for the right to vote, when my father-in-law did it with his tractor, right up to this Capitol. We use our bodies to tell the truth in public. And the truth is, sometimes we need to disrupt the normalcy of everyday life to bring people's attention to the injustice and inequity that seem to fly by the faces of too many, but is felt very deeply by too many Minnesotans. And instead of responding to that truth we're telling with our bodies, with policies and constructive conversations, let's just punish them more. We don't want to hear about it. Let's underfund our schools. Let's cut transportation by 40%. Let's not make raises for the PCAs. Let's not fund vocational rehabilitation services. But when people want to tell us the truth about what that does to their community, let's punish them more. We don't want to hear the truth. It hurts. It's hard. We don't want to do anything about it. And the second thing I want to talk about is the Department of Corrections workers and private prisons, private for-profit prisons. Companies should not be making profits off of the incarcerations of Minnesotans. Our goal should be to reduce the number of people who are incarcerated through training, treatment, whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that we restore the freedom to Minnesotans, that we intervene so that our public is safe and people can reintegrate into the community. Not give the opportunity for a company to come in and make money off of the incarceration of people. And what happens when a company starts making money? They want to keep making more money. There is so much motivation to retain and grow that profit. That we should not be doing this. We should be working to reduce the number of people incarcerated, not increase it, and for certain, not make sure that there's a company making money off of it. So I am a no on this bill for so many reasons, but those two in particular. And I hope that many of you will join me in that no, because we can do better for Minnesotans. We can do better for our communities. We can do better for public safety. As it's been said, this bill is not about public safety. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to take this opportunity to refresh everyone's memories about a few things. First, I want to take us back to December of last year. Many of you will remember the Star Tribune ran a series about solitary confinement in our prison system. And myself, and I think nearly everyone who read that series, agreed that something needed to be done, especially when dealing with those with mental illness. And Representative Zerwas has a bill that would address some of those concerns. And it's a good bill. It's a bipartisan bill. We heard really compelling testimony in committee in support of making some of these changes. And unfortunately, there's no language and no funding in this bill now before us to deal with that crisis. And so I really think that this bill fails in that regard. There are actual people who will be affected by our failure to act when it comes to addressing solitary confinement in our prison system. And our failure to act this year is going to be more people are negatively affected by that. Second, you will probably remember just a week or two ago we passed Representative Krisha's bill, McKenna's Law, that would require that children in our child protection system be notified of their right to a public defender. And rightly, we all voted for that bill. It passed the House and the Senate unanimously. Unfortunately, here's the catch. I bet you didn't see this one coming. The public safety bill underfunds the public defenders by a lot. If this were to become law, it's estimated that 40 to 50 public defenders would be laid off. So now we have more kids being told of their right to a public defender, but there won't be enough public defenders to actually represent them and give them the services that they deserve and have a right to. And the public defender caseloads, which are already really high, will be even higher. And the attention that cases like McKenna's should have, it's not going to be there. There will be more people trying to access a system with even fewer resources and fewer attorneys. And on that same theme, this bill also expands legal aid eligibility for farmers, which is great. I support that. I think that expanding that for farmers is something that most of us supported. But unfortunately, there's another catch. Again, not surprising, this bill underfunds legal aid. So again, there will be more people rightfully seeking legal assistance, and legal aid programs will have to turn even more people away. They simply don't and won't have the staff and resources to provide those services to people who need them. As things stand right now, even before expanding the eligibility for farmers, only two of 5 people who qualify for legal aid currently receive services. 2 out of 5, so less than half of the people who qualify for legal aid are actually getting those services because things are so underfunded in that area. And adding even more people to that pool is just going to exacerbate the problem. Finally, ostensibly, we all want a fair justice system, but that requires funding. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why in this time of surplus, we aren't properly funding public safety. The Republican majority has chosen to put the priority at bailouts for health insurance companies and relief for wealthy Minnesotans with large estates above public safety. And no part of our justice system is safe this year with this proposed budget. Again, we can call this a public safety bill, but it's not making more Minnesotans safe. Please vote no.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, members, this is one of the last of the majority's omnibus bills that we're considering. And I think it's really critical to look at these bills not in isolation, but as part of a complete package, because they really represent a statement of the Republican majority's priorities. And what have we seen in those priorities? Well, on the one side, you've got tax cut for a handful of the wealthiest estates in each of our districts, literally a handful, and a property tax cut that disproportionately benefits out-of-state owners of skyscrapers and big box retail stores. That's on the one side. On the other side, the Republican majority has, we know from our discussions on past bills, not prioritized our K-12 students. The basic education funding our districts receive will not even keep up with inflation and per pupil growth. Once again, a round of cuts in our schools coming up at a time of surplus. They're not prioritizing our college students, underfunding higher education, raising tuition. The result will be cutting services, in the words of Representative Pulowski, threatening our state's ability to meet the future workforce needs of our state. That's not a priority. Our precious natural resources, well, they're in for a $100 million cut in that bill. That's not a priority. Workers who've lost their jobs, we heard from Representative Davney earlier talking about the dislocated worker program, $20 million cut for that program to fund those other priorities. And our most vulnerable Minnesotans, nearly $500 million cut in services to the most vulnerable Minnesotans in our health and human services budget. Now, one would think all those priorities, okay, but the Republican majority would of course prioritize public safety, right? Well, let's consider, as was discussed earlier, 400 to 450, nearly 500 employees being laid off from the Department of Corrections. What does the Department of Corrections do? They run our prisons. They run our prisons. And these are people who, when people get out of prison, these are people who are supervising them. And the staff supporting that, the Department of Corrections, nearly 500 people being laid off. You know, the deficit, by the way, for the Department of Corrections, $50 to $55 million, more than the operating budget for an entire prison. They'd have to shut the prison to meet that up, to meet that need. As was referenced by Representative Becker-Finn, public defenders, more than 40 public defenders laid off when our public defenders are already overloaded with their caseloads. Now, please, take it from a prosecutor. Public defenders are critical to public safety, not just people's rights, which of course is critical there, but actually critical to the efficient administration of justice, having people feel that they've been treated fairly, critical to public safety. 180 Department of Public Services, public safety, employees laid off, or position underfunded. Underfunding of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, slowing down our processing of evidence in cases. And then finally, as was referenced, Chief Justice Gilday describing as deeply troubling, get this, our Chief Justice, the failure to prioritize public safety in the criminal justice system, pointing out that there won't be enough judges to manage a rising caseload in an effective and timely manner, jeopardizing our state's drug courts, DWI courts, and veterans courts, members, and putting the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk. This is what our Chief Justice has pointed out to us. And actually, I'm sorry, I should have added just one more important point. Failing to replenish the disaster contingency account. Well, based on the majority's omnibus bills that have gone through so far, I think we're going to need that disaster contingency account, because there have been a lot of disasters coming all the way through. Members, it has now been just about 7 days since the majority chose to cut off negotiations and send this series of bills to a certain veto. It's just about the same amount of time that we have left, just over 7 days, about the halfway mark from when you cut off negotiations to when we need to be out of here. Every hour we spend on one of these veto missiles that is guaranteed to be vetoed is one less hour that we have to reach a successful conclusion for Minnesotans by the end of the day on May 22nd. So instead of an education bill that's going to get us less education, a higher ed bill that's going to get us higher debt and less higher education, instead of a public safety bill that's going to make us less safe, let's vote this bill down, vote these bills down, and let's get negotiations going to get a satisfactory end to the session that works for Minnesotans. Vote no.
There being no further discussion, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate File 803. Clerk will close the roll. There being 73 ayes and 55 nays, the motion prevails on the adoption of Senate File 803. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 803, as amended by conference.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, just some short comments here. First of all, Representative Hillstrom, I don't think it was unprecedented for comments, maybe for testimony, but there's been a former Chief Justice that has been pretty aware of budgets before and spoke out, and that's their right. And in your previous chairperson of our Public Safety Committee, I'm sure that you didn't satisfy everyone, and I think I can remember some critical letters of your budget floating across the desk before. So, and I know it's the previous chair's job to get up and cut into the present chair on the bill, so no hard feelings there. Representative Ward, we've been very beneficial to Youth Intervention Program. We've doubled their budget plus, and I think they'll be just fine. Representative Considine, the driver's license, I don't know how that's partisan, unless you folks have made somehow a partisan issue out of this. They people can't get driver's license now by a certain procedure, and we just thought that should be the legislators' duty instead of a bunch of unelected bureaucrats making that decision. Representative Dean, you're out of touch with the most of the Minnesota people if you think that people don't want protesters off the highways and transit and airports. Multiple surveys have shown that that's a very popular subject, is cutting down on that type of activity and increasing the penalties, which, by the way, we didn't do very much. And then the study on the prison, a watered down thing that they just have to do a study on the prison. Why in the world wouldn't you want to do a study on the prison? And then the old story about making profit of a private prison. It's not going to be a private prison. The recommendation is to run by the DOC with state workers. And if actually it's going to be on the DFL's head if that thing turns into a big prison for all these people that are these increased sentence possibilities. You could have bought it or leased it, but you don't want to do either one. You just want to let it sit there, and pretty soon the feds will own it and pack it full of prisoners, and maybe it will be private. But I think that's going to be in your head. Let's see here. So I think I had one other note here. Layoffs. Every chair that I've ever been on, or every committee that I've been on now in 15 years, we've gotten threats for layoffs. The world's going to end. State parks will be closed. Wayside rests will be closed. Every possible threat you can imagine. We didn't cut off negotiations, by the way. What we did is ended a stall out that was probably going to take us into special session. When you end up sitting in a room going line by line by line, pretty soon you get a pretty clear picture in your head of what's going on. And so I would just encourage the people out there in Minnesota, the world isn't going to end. Don't retreat into your caves with your bottled water and dehydrated food. Life will go on with this bill, just like it has in the past. Everything's going to be okay. Vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the conference report. Clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes, 54 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.